started here. All right, I'm Lauren. I'm a lead engineer on the order orchestration platform team at Stitch Fix, and I hope you're caffeinated because I am, and we're going to go through a few hours worth of content in 20 minutes. Not really. Seriously, though, there are points here that we can have much longer discussions about, and I'll just be briefly touching on them so that we could give you an overview and some hot tips on ways to integrate Temporal into your distributed systems. So, in terms of what we'll cover, I'm going to ground us a bit in what we do at Stitch Fix and how our teams have used Temporal so that we can jump into examples for you about how to find opportunities to use Temporal. Then last, I'll go over some really exciting diagrams that will outline some of our cases and our solutions and how they might map to some issues that you and your team are looking at. So a tiny bit of history to kind of ground us before we get into the fun nerdy stuff. Back in 2011, our founder Katrina Lake had an idea to disrupt the fashion industry. She launched Stitch Fix as an online personal styling service that combines data science and human stylists with a try before you buy model. And that would be to send personalized clothing and accessory to your homes. So 13 years later, we are continuously innovating, expanding, and elevating both our offerings and our tech stack. Quick note about our two basic models for shopping, since it'll come up here and there in the deck. The first is the Fix, where you tell us a bit about yourself, your size and budget, your style and fit preferences, and even the types of occasions you shop for. Then our algorithms and our stylists work perfectly in sync to curate a selection of handpicked items that we send to your door. You can try on clothing and accessories in the comfort of your own home, and you keep what you like, send back what you don't, and then you're only charged for what you keep. That's different from our other model, which is Freestyles. That's a pay-at-purchase shopping experience where we still curate the items based on a client's personal style preferences and fit and size. So, what do we actually build and support? Back in 2011, there weren't really a lot of options for third-party infrastructure. So Stitch Fix decided to build a lot of our own tools, so both our website and our tools. We wanted to move fast, so we started with a Rails application, and that really did help us to build and release incrementally and quickly. It helped give us the internal support and the external experiences needed to support the business as it evolved. So then as Stitch Fix grew, and as the business solidified and stable, we were able to then pivot and shift gears towards scalable solutions and distributed systems. Along the way, we've built tools and systems for our data scientists, our stylists, customer service, our warehouse. We've even done our own container orchestration in-house. So as part of our continual pursuit of self-disruption and client happiness, we're constantly asking ourselves, how do we elevate our existing infrastructure to enable new customer experiences and expanded possibilities? So currently, across our org and our tech stack, we have a diverse ecosystem of tools, technologies, and approaches. We've got a mostly deconstructed Rails monolith. Now we have tons and tons of front and back end microservices. They're in different languages. Some are run by endpoint calls that are synchronous. Some are run by async message and message queues. So yeah, we've got a lot of that stuff. Now we also have temporal workflows. So how did we find Temporal? Well, before there was Temporal, we had a struggle with a state machine. My team was tasked with reimagining and rebuilding a consolidated order platform that we hoped would consolidate several of these microservices and be able to manage state for our two very different shopping models: try before you buy with Fixes and payment at checkout with Freestyles. Once we were looking into this, it was getting way too complicated. And one of our principals went out, did some research, and found Temporal. He pitched it to us and to our leadership, and we were able to dive in on learning and experimenting with workflows. We settled on one of the designs, and we worked to prove it out slowly by shadowing traffic up to 100% of our Fixes. We even tested some live orders, and it was really exciting. Initially, it was this kind of pure R&D period. It felt like we had unlimited time for the whole team to be learning and experimenting with Temporal. But the reality is that our team isn't an R&D team, and we eventually had to pivot back to feature work. So we had to then step back and really scrutinize our systems and figure out how we were going to start adapting production code in ways that fit with our deadlines and to get buy-in from our leadership so that they were as excited and confident in Temporal as we were. So how did we build confidence in Temporal? We decided to carve out one part of a lifecycle step for a single order type that generated the least amount of revenue. We used messages in one of our Ruby applications to bounce orders to a workflow in a Go app so that we could make use of a new inventory feature that was written in Go and some really cool temporal features. We put it through a really intense testing period, and we slowly released it to 100% of clients. It was wildly successful. It seemed like this was a pattern that we could use successfully, so we then started applying it to other types of orders and other lifecycle steps. In the meantime, another one of our teams wanted to try Temporal. They wanted to use it to have a workflow to process some massive JSON documents that we had to do on a daily basis. And they were really not excited about all of the extra infrastructure, the new database, the updated database columns, all of the retry logic that they were gonna have to do to fetch and process this data. So they'd heard from us that Temporal would make this a breeze. We helped them out, and they were up and running in no time. So that's really where the idea for this presentation came about. My team had been trying to find creative ways to be able to adopt Temporal. We were hitting challenges and learning a lot, and we were able to get another team up and running really fast. So we thought it'd be really cool to try and share the love. So, finding opportunities. When it comes to finding opportunities, we found that it really starts by thinking procedurally. So, quick story time. My first experience with production code was a single Python class that had one function. It was 1,000 lines long. I didn't have a word for it yet, but that was procedural code that was crammed into an object in a non-object oriented way. So I later moved on to Ruby and then to Go. And once I found Go, I was like, oh, I really like this functional programming. And then as I've interacted with people who are learning Go coming from an object-oriented language, I found that some people actually have a harder time initially thinking in a procedural way because they're so used to that OO background. And that's totally fair because I had trouble adjusting to real object-oriented programming because of my initial experiences with that production code. So it's also okay for people to think in different ways. I might reach for procedural, others might reach for object-oriented. It's all good. There are benefits to having different kinds of thought processes, different kinds of thinking, and different kinds of diversity on a team. So the second point there, something I've chatted with different colleagues about over the years is that at some point, even a Rails application will break down into purely procedural code. You end up just defining an object that runs functional business logic anyway. So all this to say, there are definitely places in your code right now that you could likely turn into a workflow. So getting back to it, how do you find procedural code that's already in your code base? Well, do you have a function that's 1,000 lines long or just a function that's way too long? Are there parts of your code that you can look at that are supposed to do a straightforward thing, but then when you look at it, the components or objects are broken down into, some sort of setup where you read it and you just end up making faces at the code as you read. You can also think of it this way. If you're talking with a colleague and you could actually number the steps about the code that you're trying to talk about, that's procedural code. So then outside of just replacing procedural code,